Alright, for my final trick of the night, I am going to tie the... Oh, now it's personal. There we go. That'll teach them. It's teaching me. The Jig Rubber Leg Sculpin. Extra heavy. This is a pattern I've been tying for, I really don't know how long. I feel like it couldn't have been too much longer after I started selling on, I guess, Etsy. And ironically, despite how well it's always sold, this is the only pattern I've offered with, or I should say consistently offered with, hidden beads. So speaking of which, this is a number, okay, in air quotes, number 10 fulling mill short shank 5125 hook. I call it a number 8, and whenever you see it on my site, it's labeled as a number 8, or on Instagram, I'm calling it a number 8 because it is a significantly larger than advertised hook. But despite that, it is a fantastic hook, the whole range. So I've got one of those 8, 10, 11, whatever hook with a 4mm tungsten bead up front and 2 3mm tungsten beads that are going to be hidden in the body. I'm just starting the thread behind the front bead as I would any fly, and once I've got it locked in and a slight thread dam built, just enough to kind of keep this first or last, whichever direction you're going, this middle bead, I want to create just a slight gap, because as with any zonker or bulky-ish streamer pattern, if you take everything to the bead, and it's already gonna be a lot of bulk back up here. So if you add on, well, not on top of that, add below that a tungsten bead that's jammed up against it, I mean, you're going to be overflowing before you know it with materials, and you're going to have to paint the fly with resin or super glue just to keep the knot in place. So I like that void just as a place to seat all my materials and eventually seat my knot. So yeah, start the bead, then jump the thread back, locking in both of these beads. And once I've got those locked in, I'm taking my thread back just to build up a thread underbody, just to dress the shank, to give the wabbit a base that's going to prevent it from pulling off the hook shank, the slick hook shank. So the first thing I'm adding is the tail, and I've just got a piece of zonker that's, I guess, I don't know if I intended this, but it's cut pretty much as long as the hook, the hide is, and that's going to give me a tail that's probably 2 hooks in length, give or take. So this one had a relatively thick hide, so I've just taken my scissors at a super shallow angle and cut some of that hide just to taper it back, give my tie-in a little better seating, but also minimize that bulk in the back of the hook. So I'm just tying it in, and with tight thread wraps, but also pulling the tail back. So when I release it, the spongy hide, I mean, you're digging down into it, and there's really no need to super glue it, to double it over. If you're dealing with one of those paper thin hides that you'll occasionally get, then that's a different story. But for something like this that's big and beefy, it's not coming out if you're tying it down tight. So I've added the tail, and just to touch on the color, so I've been harping a lot on Fully Mill lately. In no way am I affiliated with them besides my wholesale account. Like, I pay for everything. I get the occasional sample, but they've just been releasing phenomenal materials, like back to back to back for the past 2 years or so now. And I've just been so pleased. And this zonker is another example. This is the bar gold, I believe, and it's probably my favorite zonker material I've ever messed with. You can't really tell from the short tail, but like, it's just got such a rich color. And now I've bought some that's been a little bit paler, so the dye batch will vary, but overall, and especially this particular dye lot, was, or is, just super cool. And it's got that buttery brown trout look, so it's good for, I've tied larger streamers with it because of it oozes that brown trout fingerling color where they're not yet like super defined. But then this smaller variation has a really cool like lighter color sculpin mottled look. So it's just a super versatile, more natural color to go along with the greens, the blacks, the typical versions. So that's enough mouth words as I go into more mouth words. Sorry, that's enough unrelated mouth words. So one thing I've started doing different on this, starting with this past batch, is adding just a sparse underwing, I suppose you would call it, of something like an ice dub, flashy material. I have and will continue to use all sorts of things. I mean, at the end of the day, it just comes down to whatever's the right color, I'll use it, that I'm looking for. And for this one, it happened to be a lighter tan just to give it that belly, and ice dub was the best thing I had in that shade. So now that I've got the tail / underwing fixed up, I'm going to go into the body. And for that, I cannot stand wrapping zonkers. I just feel like it's a waste of hook. You get so much bulk, and tying it off is always, there's no clean way to do it. You're trapping hair, you've got that big butt end of zonker, just, it's a mess. And so I'm always using dubbing loops, and I have went around and around with different methods of applying the zonker strip to the loop. I haven't gone through a ton of different ways. It's been a clip, or I've just put the hide straight in here and trimmed it off. But regardless, here lately, my favorite method has been taking like a chunk of strip, and I've got them, I'm doing these just for the video, but when I'm doing the batch, I've got it measured out to like from, I don't know how big the frame is right now, but from like my material clip to this bend, or something easy to keep checking as I'm cutting. And so I've got a pile of strips that if you try and clip this dry, you're gonna have hair going everywhere, and a quarter of it's not even gonna be in the clip. So I'll take the zonker strip and run it against the grain through this little cup with a rag that's got some water in it, and basically dampen the strip, and then pull all the hairs, get them to stand vertical, so that it just makes it so much easier to clip. So now that I've got them dampened, and you don't want them sopping wet, because then, well, it doesn't really matter for you, but for this video's sake, if I had it sopping wet, it would never dry, and you wouldn't see what it looked like at the end. Which I guess it would be more accurate, because it's going to be wet in the end of the day anyways. But we're not tying a user fly, we're tying a showpiece. So I've got this custom-made clip, my handiwork. I took a Plano compartment separator, cut it in half, and glued it to my little bulldog clip, one of the same ones that I use for CDC, and basically just extended it from 1 inch to maybe 1.5 inches, just to grab a little more material, and it has surprisingly worked really well. So I've put the hair in the loop, and now I'm just gonna make sure it's all spread out, evenly distributed, but also want just a longer noodle, I guess, of hair. I don't want it all condensed in a 1.5 inch section, because the longer it is, the more control I have of adding and subtracting hair in a given spot. Whereas if it was all shoved into the same clump, I've got less wraps I can make throughout the hook. And I kind of leave some of the butt ends, especially on, like, this is a longer strip. So instead of trimming them, I just leave them, and I try to stagger them maybe a little bit. But I feel like that adds a little bit of bulk as it props up those longer guard hairs. So it's just a little bulk without being more full-length hair. It's more of the illusion of bulk, or I just would call them shoulder, because it's lifting up everything else. So I just hit it with the brush once it's spun up to loosen all the clumps. And just start wrapping. And as I wrap, I'm pulling. I saw there's a Gallup video. Well, there's many Kelly Gallup videos where he's wrapping chenille. And just harping on, make a wrap, make 2 wraps, and then just pull it. Cinch that stuff down. And ever since seeing that, I try to apply it to as much as I can, because that's why I can get away with tying this fly with no glue. I used to spend the time gluing in the beads and doing all this mess, but after a while I realized if I just make every wrap tight, really cinch it down, then it's as secure as it'll ever be. and I'm using 6/0 on this. So this dubbing loop is 4 strands of 6/0. I've got basically a double dubbing loop, and so you can get some tension on that thing. So much so that I'm actually biting into the tungsten bead, but that's partly to do with my Hulk-like strength. I just leave that for y'all. And almost lastly, I just add the rubber legs, and like everything, I've gone through multiple different materials for the legs, and I love the look of the silicone, this silly legs, but they are just so fragile. Like, if you don't break them tying them or adjusting them, you're gonna break them fishing them. And so I've started using, surprise, Fooling Mills Micro Flex Floss for these legs, and they lack some of the glitter and the barring and all that, but being the micro size, they've got just incredible movement, and being the spandex product, one of the many variations on the market, even the micro size is going to be more durable than the silly legs, the whatever the various brands call them. And at the end of the day, I will happily sacrifice a little bit of bin appeal for a better product, and it might not sell as well, but at least I know it's functionally superior and all that good stuff. So yeah, that's it. I just finish it off with a little glittery stuff. In this case, Fooling Mills Flash Dub, and I think it's light brown, which is another color of dubbing that I've been loving. Like, it's just gone perfectly with so many things I've tied lately. It's just got really the perfect shade for most browns and olives, so I've just been finishing every fly I can with the stuff, but I'll get burnt out on it and move to something else eventually. But I'll just go overboard for the time being, as usual. So that is the heavyweight Jig Sculpin rubber leg thing that I can never say right despite naming it. Super heavy, super hairy, kinda leggy, and a little sparkly, but extra fishy. Boom. That's it. Goodbye.